So welcome to the Poetry Flash reading series. Absolutely delighted that you're here, that you found your way here. Tonight we are delighted to present C.S. Giscombe and Mary Gilliland. Their books are available here, as you can see, and after the reading, and also online at bookshop.org/shop/Poetry Flash. And we also have a broadside by C.S. Giscombe that is free over here. If you take a look, it's really very cool. Remember to visit poetryflash.org to see our reviews, future events, all sorts of updates. Videos of our readings, including the video of tonight's reading that Steve K. is going to produce for you, can be viewed on the Poetry Flash YouTube channel. And to join our email event list, so you can find out about future events, see poetryflash.org or sign up on our analog clipboard right over here with a pen. So you don't have to do it digitally if you don't want. So thanks to Katie Carriaga, Stephen Bunza, and Rosalinda Monroy for being here tonight from Poetry Flash and helping. And thanks to the Art House Gallery, and thanks to Harold Adler. Support Art House. Now, to introduce the poets, I give you Associate Editor Richard Silberg.
Hi. Glad to see everyone. Cecil is going to read first, C.S. Giscombe. This is his new book, Negro Mountain. He's got many books, Giscombe Road, Train Music, and others. But this is really an intense thinking book written in an easygoing, somewhat cryptic style. Now, Negro Mountain refers to a mountain ridge in the Alleghenies across Maryland and another state, Pennsylvania, I think. And in the 1750s, a land speculator named Thomas Cressop got involved in a skirmish with Native Americans, and his favorite manservant, who is described as a colossal black man, a huge black man named Nemesis, is killed. And they roll his body into a crevice in the mountains. So this is Negro Mountain. Now the book circles on itself. It ends with wolves, and it begins with wolves. It begins with 7 dreams, and the first dream is of wolves in the driveway. And the dreamer, presumably Cecil, the poet, hangs with these wolves that don't hurt him. And the wolves, there's a lot of thought about predators and prey, and jaguars, wolves, dogs, twilight, which is described in French as entre chien et loup, between the dog and the wolf. So what does all that mean? In in the final section, notes on religion, along with much else, talking about wolves interbreeding, talking about jaguars and jungle beasts. There are three short questions, 2 words each, which go, what Negro, Negro what, and what Negro? So are we thinking along with Cecil here? Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Joyce. And I'm extremely happy to be here this evening. Happy to be reading with my old friend Mary Gilliland. We've known each other since the 70s, I believe. Okay. And I'm going to read from the new book, the Negro Mountain book, which came out in October. And there are copies there, and as Joyce said, there's a broadside of the first poem, the one that was mentioned earlier. Richard mentioned. That's free. Just take one. But I'm going to read from another series of poems first. A very short one. I'm still a long distance cyclist. Still a biker, still a crazy guy on a bike. A practice I began in my late 20s. I've ridden from here, from the Bay Area, into and through Oregon, Washington, British Columbia a few times in the last years, and south over Big Sur as far as Santa Barbara. These poems, the 2 poems I'm going to read from that series, are from a series based on my notes and hand-drawn maps from those rides. They're variations on the haibun form. The idea is that the hand-drawn map takes the place of the traditional haiku at the end of the unadorned direct prose of the first part of the poem. These are 2 poems based on trips some years ago, not the recent ones, but trips from a long time ago, both in the East, from when I lived across the city of Ithaca, across town from my friend Mary Gilliland. First is simply called Burlington Hurricane Tour. It's Burlington, Vermont. Ithaca, Burlington, Rutland, Great Meadows, Hudson Falls, Albany, New York, home on Amtrak, September 1985, 433 miles. I'd wanted to ride across the Adirondacks, and David Warren came with me as far as DeRidder, company for the first 40 miles, and then turned off to go back home, Ithaca, a different way. A wide bow south to Otsilic Center, and then the climb from Marathon and the Tiafnahoga. 100-mile day for him. Central New York was low, rolling hills, a mile for us every 5 minutes. First night I camped at the state park at Chittenango Falls. The ranger only worked weekends, he said during the week he taught high school at Cazenovia. I ran programs there, I said, 8 years earlier. I'd fallen half in love with one of the teachers, and I asked, did he know her? Just the name, he said. And he said I should get an access pass, the state's program I'd not known of, free park admission to disabled New Yorkers. And he gave me a form to give to a doctor. 2 nights on, tenting at Old Forge, I dreamed that the town near which I'd lived in the Maritimes, St. George, New Brunswick, was both a town and the top floor of a building one got to through switchback roads or rickety staircases. Either way, both ways. What memory was, I thought later, a sunny picture and then the clearer picture of several rooms. Another Giscombe lived in town, in the dream, and someone showed me a picture of a white girl with strawberry blonde hair and a thin face, an old photograph of her as a child. In another, in the town archives, she was with her parents. The father was very dark-skinned, and his long hair was in tufts like gray cumulus clouds, and he had a lantern jaw. But the mother was plump and white, pasty in fact, and had one arm. The girl's name was Daisy, my mother's name. Apparently, I was disabled, the prosthetic arm noted at Chittenango Falls, and I'd considered this as I'd ridden into Old Forge. South Africa was in the news, and my sister, in the dream, visited me in town cautiously, wondering if St. George was like Pretoria. At the end of the dream, it was on fire, and the volunteer firefighters raced through the switchbacks in rusty pickup trucks, and others took the stairs, 2 at a time, but, it was revealed, only the forest, which surrounded the town, was burning. I'd stayed in Barneveld, New York, the second night, with Scott Collins and Rosette Sherman. Rosette pregnant, all of us loose. They still had the dairy then. Leaving Barneveld, I swung up into the mountains through Forestport and Woodgate, and 3 days later crossed into Vermont on the Port Kent Ferry. Followed the lake south then, and then the Champlain Canal, Fort Anne, Fort Edward, to the Hudson River. Sidewall on the rear tire had given out on Blue Mountain Hill, and it took 2 hours and all the patches I had to mend it. At Western Auto, in Tupper Lake, least favored of the chain of Adirondack lake towns, I'd bought new tubes and a low-pressure gum wall, but then limped all the way to dinner at the Hotel Saranac in Saranac Lake, 25 miles on my patches, which held, the daylight holding as well, because it was still summer. Second one is called First Montreal Tour. From Slaterville Springs, New York, where I lived outside of Ithaca, Slaterville Springs, Ithaca, Syracuse, Seaway Trail, Ogdensburg, Saint-Zotique, Quebec, Montreal, home on Amtrak, October 1980, 354 miles. Pushed up from the south on the Seaway Trail, New York State Route 3 along Lake Ontario, crossing newly built bridges over its feeder creeks, a water-level route, east shore of the lake. Dead kingfisher above one creek, deep blue of the bird, even in death. Tangled in monofilament, itself pale blue. The bird hanging in that from a cable over the water. Crisp October days, 1980. Minor repair. A cleverly made T-shaped support to keep the rack from pressing on the brake cables, apparently a common problem, at Crown City Cycles in Cortland, New York. Rode later up South Salina Street in Syracuse, the old neighborhood, coming through just past dark. Sal's Birdland, a chicken shack, and the Jerusalem Grocery, Eddie's Barber Shop, South Side. The first is always sweetest. When I came finally into Montreal, I came in on Lakeshore Drive in Westmount, and then came further in along Rue Bord du Lac in light snow. First view of the St. Lawrence from the town of Hammond. Lines of green fields below me, almost plains of green, fewer intersecting fields than long, thin fields in bands, shades of green and yellow, stacked below where I paused to rest. Gently sloped hill, trees at the bottom between the grass and the water. Had observed the first night that everything translates into known quantities, or what one knows of quantities. Noted as I went further in the trip itself, that because I had no familiarity with or even specific knowledge of the territory, I fell back on the fact of distance, how I knew, say, what 10 miles was. Perhaps this is obvious. The Crown City boys had had opera on the radio, crossed into Canada on the Oberg Bridge, toll waived, had followed Triangle Road to Chippewa Bay. Vision incident. A child's voice taunted me with a cliché concerning death and the seasons. An auditory hallucination. Also in Hammond. Deep blue sky. Not for the last time. Had been warned about Hammond. But what can you do? Not go? Jeez. Thank you. Okay. Negro Mountain, published last October. It's a real mountain in Pennsylvania, as Richard said, straddles the state line with Maryland. I lived in rural Pennsylvania for 10 years, and the first page of the book, and it's a copy of it over there. And as Joyce said, you take a broadside. I've got a bunch of them. I have no idea what to do with them. Negro Mountain in the Allegheny Range of the eastern United States. is a long ridge that straddles the Pennsylvania-Maryland border and the Mason-Dixon line. The ridge has been known as Negro Mountain since the late 18th century because of an incident that took place there in the 1750s. In a skirmish between a band of English speculators led by Thomas Cresap and a party of Native Americans, a black man accompanying the English group was killed by a shot fired by one of the Native Americans. The black man's name, as it's been handed down in Pennsylvania stories, was Nemesis, or Nemesis, the spelling varies. Brant's Mayer, in his 1851 book on the Iroquois leader Logan and the Cresap family, notes that Negro Mountain is where a gigantic African who belonged to Cresap's party bequeathed his name in death to the towering cliffs. All right. There are no towering cliffs there. It's the Alleghanies, the low mountains. The ridge's name, however, has been a matter of public controversy beginning in the 1920s, when the U.S. Geological Survey declared Negro Mountain's highest point to be the highest point in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The black man, called Nemesis or Nemesis, in the scaffolding of stories, who died on the ridge now called Negro Mountain, is beyond reach. The mountain, the very long shadow, survives. The first section of the book, again as Richard pointed out, is called Seven Dreams, and they're real dreams. First dream, which I remember having when I was 7 years old. It's still, as I speak to you now, it's still very much in my head. I can still see it. Wolves came up the driveway and through the side yard of the old house. This was in kindergarten time. And I stood still, though I was frightened to be in their midst, and they took note of me, but did not bite or threaten me. The light was light I had known by then, having seen it in the hour before a thunderstorm, dull, bitter light, and everywhere. Dull, bitter light and everywhere, though without apparent source. The wolves had ragged gray pelts, bad fur, tufts of it, and their hindquarters were skinny in comparison to their very big shoulders. They'd come in apparently from the street, Giscombe Drive, and onto the property, which was nearly an acre and had once been a farmstead, and they parted around where I was standing. It was almost a literal wave of them, those wolves, as though they'd come up the hill from West 3rd Street, or somehow got through the chain-link fence of the VA cemetery that traced the hill on Giscombe Drive. A white friend wrote me, "The human figure passes through the animal pack unharmed." And she said that she saw the dream as being not about the wolves as much as passing through adversity. This exchange decades after the dream itself, which had been a thing of moment, visual, tinctured with obvious anxiety, current in my memory for that time before the year she and I met. Make no mistake, dear and articulate friends, I knew it was an unstable moment. My thumbs were different, I'd seen, from one another. Beyond the driveway had been pear and walnut trees. One passes through a wood, or a track does. A dull feeling overtakes you in the field. There had been a gate at the driveway, but only the posts remained, grown over by the hedges that stopped on either side of the entrance from the street. What do hills summarize? Origin stories? Right and left separated long before this. Bait me, love. I can pass until I speak. Second dream. I was a woman in a prison camp. My job was to work in the yard. I walked away, drifted north like I do, and came to Canada. But by then I was a man dressed in a long Soviet coat, wool with a red collar. Better I would have retreated to the mountains, I thought, or the interior. Why not just go on into Canada, someone said. It was how the border had appeared so quickly when my experience was that the roads that were the way over were always further north than I'd figured when I'd set out. In my experience, waking life, nothing had readied me for such an arrival. Walking north, I was surely out of bounds. A city woman, then a man indistinguishable from his own prowess. You know how I figure, I thought. Typically, I dreamed and at the same time watched the dream. The gate was open. I watched myself as if from a car at a drive-in movie. I could have been up on the Angry Mountains, I thought. That could be the subject matter or the theme. Someone else stole my coat at a soup kitchen while I ate, so I took another one. puffy, polyester-filled, and walked on, heading for a triangle of roads I remembered coming out of the woods, having met those roads, but as a young man. Figure that. The woods came down the hill and stopped, and a single bright road, looping, led up into the recollected triangle. It was not, of course, really a triangle, but 3 ways, 3 lanes into the trees, that met the bright road in a series of intersections. I perceived a common drama, but saw endless jungle. "Name me," I said. I had been a handsome woman of indeterminate size and color. "If I were her, I'd be a different animal," said I. "I'd be down on the coast. I'd have made a plan. Were I she, I'd likely be a monster's dark mother," I thought. I didn't know where to stop. The mountain intervened, unhidden, foul-figured. "Ask me, name it. Vividness can be misleading. I don't know where to stop. Name another ending." The second section of the book is called The Negro Mountains, and the titles of the individual poems refer to real Pennsylvania mountain ranges and one Jamaican mountain range, but I'm not going to read that poem. Okay. The Endless Mountains. The endless mountains could as well be the werewolf mountains. Count some days. The mountains just repel the story with their endlessness. A dusky fellow could give them enough to not be bothered by them for more. Come nighttime, please. The evening wolf is the necessary wolf. From now on, don't bother me about it. A poem called 7 Mountains. She said, "It's in God's hands now. Evil's limitless and multiple locations serve. Make a rural cure, doctor. Make a favorable poultice. Mountains itch all over, all the way down. The mountaintops are bare rock and wave-like patterns. There's often as not a fat saddle between the ridges. Who do you think you saw? Second sight, second thought. Apostrophe is wide, uncountable. Mountain's the default. In real life, it's a tough neighborhood, doctor. Haunted, in fact. Nothing's enough. Count off." The Allegheny Plateau. Travel's enigmatic, and we don't have to go to Negro Mountain to see that. Doom being in the details is all there is to know. Sometimes music creeps forward and slows down to nothing like an animal could. The trace is fact, but content, the dull feeling, is everywhere. Forms noise in the bushes. No bottom to the songs, which must be their charm, such as apparent, even obvious. The mountains are ridge on a plateau. Voices are that noise getting ahead of itself. It'd seem that certainty's grounded in repetition, one thing on top of another. The mountain's available. Anglicize that. What do you travel to think about anything? The bear went over the mountain. I said this before. Let's be clear, I said then. Let's be clear. Let's be clear, love. There's no frame in here. There's nothing but weather on rock. Carol me. Speaker's the werewolf on Negro Mountain, wouldn't you say, doctor? Carol me that. What do you think they saw? And it's a poem in reference to my mother's father, and the poem begins with Census Bureau jargon as a title. Event place, Beat 3, Camden, Madison County, Mississippi, United States, 1900 census. Willie Smith, B for black, at 5. Time of day would be the factor, but some days wolves would have come, and easily, along the creeks and rivers, and through the cane as well, and the cypress swamps. Safe to say, doctor. They would have been red wolves, those wolves. Canis rufus, doc. Almost bright-colored in their descriptions, and Mississippi Negroes, because of working outside then, would have likely crossed paths with such wolves, at work, or possibly, or even more likely, while hunting. Another fair speculation, eh? and the meat getting ever closer to the bone. Persona yourself, my faithful MD, occupational tattering aside, color intended. Commerce in souls and spirit to be avoided, but you still being the gentle priest. Ancestry.com, good brother. And no endless plateau, lowland in its place, lowland in its place, coming to mind as pure speculation, formless. But do no harm, Mr. Obia, voiced nothing, and the swamps here, in this location, also repel the story and terms besiege us. Got that one right, root man. Not a mountain in sight, umber, curse-colored, or crowed, to offer opinions about any kind of wolf thereupon. Disfigure me, think it over, bring a shape like it was medicine. Interested speakers came through the scene, old Natchez Trace being just over there. We don't have to go to Negro Mountain. Crow, baby. Question comes up again like bioluminescence. The educated speaker might ask, what's the alliance between red wolves and the Negro character? Pine forests. Impatiently, have you guessed it yet? From just what is the voice speaking? Absence in the swamp, brother. Negroes in the wildwood. Closest we're going to get. No moon. Extirpated now. Am I right, Doc? And just, I think just two more. I lived in just one more. I lived in a county seat, Bellefonte, Center County, Pennsylvania. Bald Eagle Mountain backed up on the town. Bald Eagle Mountain. I'm as interested in Bellefonte as I am on the mountain. There's the mild nausea. There's having had a presentiment. There not being, apparently, enough white to the world. Measure it against the downturned mouth of Negroid displeasure. Trace the hill, readers. Study the Negro frontier. Rest in the awful shadow. Let such fall and fall and fall and clang. Or make note of the addresses herein. Let vexed be also a kind of interest, a two-hander for certain. One wishes, doctor, for an educated listener. Just look over their heads, she would say. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Our next reader is Mary Gilliland, and this is her third book, The Devil's Fools, which I'm wondering, are we the devil's fools? There are wonderful love poems in this book, and poems about the alternation of joy, sorrow, glory, and despair. And the book is written in an intensely rhythmic musical style, a style that is spare in words. It's an extreme economy of words in expressing what it's going for. And I'm going to read you a few lines that really impress me. Now, this is from a three-part poem on Ruslan Chapel in Midlothian, Scotland. And this is the end of the last section. On which the universe depends. The dance that splices dancers. Why does one helix fold upon another in its spin? Plasm, eyeless, gropes toward its new fate, the way a trampled dragon's might meet a wounded saint. So let's give her a warm welcome, Mary Gilliland.
Thank you. And thank you, Joyce, and thank you, Cecil, for doing this together. It's a real joy to be here. I lived in this area when I was young and when Poetry Flash was young. That was many years ago. I just came in from Ithaca, New York. I think the night before last. I'm still a little jet lagged, and so I'm going to begin with actually a poem from the chapbook that's also here, The Ruined Walled Castle Garden. Do I have this right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. In Ithaca, where I live, there's Cornell, which is the cause of many friendships. And Cornell has a campus over in Qatar, in Doha, where I taught for a bit, about 15 years ago or more. And this gives you a little tour of the city as it was then. It went from sort of a Bedouin country to the 22nd century in about, 20-year period. Flamingos feed far in the shallows. Embassy Row starts with Morocco in salmon cement, then Pakistan, Egypt, spaces in sand for what will be India, turns the corner in beauty, glazed azure, scrolled lemon, and cobalt spiral motifs of Iran. At the sea line, there's rubble, tan and black nurslings, sometimes a white one, feed at the camel souk. The falcon souk, small and deserted, is locked, since avian flu turned regalia to harness. The city's one suburb grows south past the bay, along the big water. Skirted guest workers dock the day's catch, unload the Gulf shrimp that fills one of the sandwiches served for high tea in the first floor cafe of a place built to seem a square Aztec temple, the Sheraton Doha. Mangroves that lined shores have donated salt flats to fill for construction. Fewer pink, stilted birds winter over. And I doubt there's a flamingo there now anymore. Thank you. I'm going to stay over in that part of the world for a little bit. While I was there, my country was engaged in one of its endless wars across the Gulf to the north. And a couple of phrases in this poem are translations of the early names of Baghdad. One is City of Peace, is a translation of its name, and Gate of the Gods. Occupied. Bruised ribs, raked shins, in the search for a sweet grape among dry vines. Endlessly back and forth, reading maps, reading the legends, City of Peace, Gate of the Gods. Standing knee-deep in the mud of an untilled field, a rogue bull amid the red dirge. Hub of bricks on the floodplain, submerged save for its fame, re-upped streets radial from the garden. Called again to prayer, land of marshes and sand, looted and forced once more. Bone chips rattling, arms gone to a roadside bomb, meat cold in the bowl. Infinitives. Oh, does everyone know the Garden of the Hesperides? Oh, and the Blessed Isles of the West. Those were the Celtic islands where the souls would go after death. And the Hesperides were the shining maidens who lived on an island with the tree that had the golden apples. One of those apples started the Trojan War when Aphrodite threw it to Paris. That's, by the way, it's not part of the poem, but there's references, they're mentioned in the poem. Infinitives. To admit fields are on fire, oil fields, though we do not yet see them burning. To remember our grandparents sweltered each summer waiting for the streetcar, for nightfall. To irrigate loosened earth with native water. To bail out the seed banks, to chew our food, to call the bluff of the brand name the marketing genius, to digest resources burnt to a crisp threshold, to savor our craving to satiation, to be free of litter strewn beyond us, steering through the Hesperides, sacred groves, blessed isles, past the ghost of a man on the moon's new frontier, our course set for the destitute sunset. In addition to these two books, which you are welcome to browse and purchase and get for your Valentine as well, we also have, I have a book that's going to be published 1 month from today. And you can take a postcard all about it after the reading. And I want to read one poem that's just in that book. The book's called Ember Days. And the poem is called Lincoln in Another Bardo. If aluminum foil hadn't more glints, a crow would lift me up for nesting matter. There's an off chance she might pilfer me for crowning ornament, one less loose copper. Copper I am, not iron, though a long ways from the silver tongue of thy prophets. I shine in the footsteps of passers-by. I shine small and round and presidential. Do you see me slow to anger, gracious and merciful, abiding in steadfast love? You would seem to be addressing old envelopes stamped with my visage. Games and prizes, land and research have waylaid your prodigal feet. I don't want to hold you up, but I do. The arc of history could bend with you. So, I'm going to go to an entirely different type of historical figure now. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her father 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her mother 41. This is the rhyme that school children probably still do about one of the first American celebrities. At her trial for being an axe murderer, Lizzie Borden, there were dispatches going out to the newspapers in the 19th century from Fall River, Massachusetts, like every day, because she was so beautiful. And they never proved she did it. So this poem doesn't condemn her, but it doesn't condone her either. About to burn her dress. Where has she been this sweltering day since she paused beside the horsehair armrest and interrupted Mr. Borden's nap? Then glided by the kitchen where the maid was plunged into a sticky business, canning, and picked her way out to the shed. The nimbus clouds cut open, the sluice dulls her scarlet apron, crystals pitter-patter on her nose. Or is the cloudburst something that, like so much else, only her far-fetching imagination sees? Fall River slips away, the shed's wood floor, the axe, the open door. Lizzie's willowy, an orphaned flower in the yard, and done with Papa's snores from the settee. Empty eyes raised to cold heaven, she stalks the plank that keeps her long skirt from fresh puddles on her way back to the house. I know there's a lot of love poems, and I will read one, maybe two, but I'm going to stick with the evil people for a little bit, because, you know, we have all these isms that are interfering with our being a society, and a lot of times, for a long time, there's been discussions like, what's the one you start with to try to get the domino effect, to get rid of all the others. And I have just in my gut felt for some time that militarism is the one that just sprouts everything else. And so something I do in poetry is I try to be other people I can't comprehend, how they could possibly be the way they are. And right now, there's just a lot of rogues at large and at power in the world. And so this poem is Cain, and it's named for the first murderer in the Bible who killed his brother. And I'm speaking for him. I don't plan these things. When I start writing, I don't know even what I'm going to write about. But there's just a lot of these guys. And the setting for this is actually a sort of a Celtic setting. I put him there. And tumuli is mentioned. And in case you don't know what that word is, it's a barrow. It's a place where people are buried. Cain. Angst has never been other than sweet. Atop tumuli worn with eons of rains, gravity bundling the hours. How birds homed in that first time from every direction. An unhurried mist cracked the tumult of branch. The taste has not changed. I leave him unburied wherever he lists. Lance this stripling wind, unsheathe the blast. I make use of mythologies and things I've inherited, like we all do. And this poem is named Lyre. It's spelled L-Y-R-E, however you might be hearing it. And it is speaking as Odysseus. I'm from Ithaca, so it's kind of, you know. But it sort of asks the questions, what would happen if he was called to account for his amnesia? So, Lyre. Life had, the astrologer said, but one curse. I could not go mad. When I heard the music I cannot repeat, I was halfway home, 5 years into the voyage. Their voices were honey, measure by measure, dropped on the small of my back. I married the ropes as well as the mast, my writhing as ranting a plea as my shouts. Today I recall not one word. When I beached, I made thanks. I walked home to the face without an adventure to which I was wedded. Now I'll let Persephone have a comment on being swept away to the underworld by Hades. And I call it Proserpine, and I really relate to the Greek figures as Greek, but Proserpine called to have her Roman name because of her sassy voice in this poem. I fell in with a man from a small country. He stopped on a rainy lane and asked, did I want to ride? My mother told me always to follow my feet, but the fumes that day overpowered my nose. He bit me hard, then nubbed at my love pearl. Red seeds fell from the wound. He says I ate them. He offered me board if I paid for room among bloodless artistes and ivory heroes by charging his battery 1 or 2 shocks. Time passed and faded. There's a beauty in that. He took up his helmet. I saw he was sightless. I said, let's let it rip. Soot fell about us. Once I'd signed his note that hell could not be improved on, he let me loose for the summer. He'd have slipped me into his wallet if I'd fit. So, okay. Now we'll turn to the outdoors and love, and I really tried to get the whole world into this book. It was so long revising it and having it be a finalist in these contests, and so it's a real progression. And there are quite a few poems that actually take place in Scotland, as well as, you know, the beautiful one from Rosslyn Chapel that Richard read. So this is round home. It's called The Bargain. We do a lot of gardening. I forgive the young doe for eating the black-eyed Susans, for hosta tops bitten just as the flower heads formed. So intelligent, she waited for the sweetest mouthfuls. She's the first deer to stand, to let me sing to her. So I'm 55, Cecil. A few brief chews, then she lifts her head like a bird, walks off calmly into the woods after swallowing fallen pears. This is a good house. We let out a milk snake curled in the basement and moved in. 5 years ago, a stag browsed 6-foot burdock. Above their spikes, antlers rose before he bolted. The animals go before us, prints marking wood's edge and trail, and the fair trade of the forest, lettuce and green beans, fence wire bends where cleft hooves sank, darkening moist loam. I want to read a new poem. And I want to, when I was in my 20s and living in this area, I had no formal schooling in poetry, but what happened to me and my husband-to-be was we were invited by Gary Snyder, who some of you may know of his name, and to be his apprentices out here for up in the mountains in the Sierras. And so we studied Buddhism, we sat Zazen, we helped people build their houses, we were loaned out as free labor because we wanted to be carpenters so we could write poetry and have the balance of an active life. Anyway, it was it's just part of our lives. My husband's here tonight too. And Gary did our wedding ceremony, and I'm just very, very, very grateful, you know, and that he's still in California. And so this poem is called Old Growth, and the actual landscape of it is more my neck of the woods. It's northwest New York State near Niagara Escarpment. That's where the plants are from that are named in the poem. So this is for Gary Snyder and family. Old growth. Look where it's steep or swampy. Look in every gorge that feeds a great lake. An old tree trunk might have sinuosity or a twisted, gnarled crown. You might look for cavities or swellings, old scars on bark deeply furrowed or worn to a startling smoothness. Through the crises and risks, resilience, tight relationships, you'll find ginseng, grape fern, moonwort on the understory floor. And I'd like to do two more. Okay, that's okay? Oh, okay. This one, I merge, where is this one? This one is called Larger Than Life, and I bring together Hollywood and mushrooms. So I merge those two. And the phrases that are from movies, I'll read in a little funny voice. Larger than life. Get you, my pretty. Have what she's having. Red pill or blue pill. Together and blow. The greatest actors have no ideas of their own. They're like the caps we like, sliced raw with spinach or fried in butter, slight pressure from the teeth on the omelette's fungal fruit as we bite without much or any thought to the mycelium net beneath the ground, its tremendous job of organizing life on this planet. Frankly, my dear, nobody's perfect. Round up the usual suspects. Mushrooms concentrate nutrition. Mushrooms consume substances toxic to other life. They come up and see us sometime. Okay. Okay. I do want to read one love poem, and my husband and I have completely just about every interest in common, but we couldn't be more different as people. And so this poem is called We Live in Synchronicity. So, and it's in two columns, and so it's S-Y-N is the spelling because of synchronicity, you know, and when this was being galleys and proofread and everything, they kept saying, but this is misspelled, because I would deliberately misspell things and break words in the middle, and it's supposed to be this way. We live in synchronicity. There are treasure hunts I make that leave you scavenging for stimulation. Your capacity to be a captive of the screen leaves me unmoved. There are days we have no wishes for each other, just commands, forgetting the uniqueness of our history. You crave attention and magazine displays. I, approval and tax rebates. Will the gods inside your flickering box or mine behind the tree cut us a little slack? Fates, single-roofed, are duplex roosts, separate but equal, and yearning for one body? Our private efforts look like willful acts and spiritual alibis. Let's wage domestic profit overlapped in time. If you would clean the ceilings, I'll consider floors. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks to these two lovely poets, Mary Gilliland and C.S. Giscombe. It was an absolute pleasure to have you read tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. And just really quickly, February 18th, Jerry Ratch and then Drina Zawinski. And February 22nd, Andrea Cohen and Katie Peterson. So join us then. Thank you.